can't overstate how much they dislike that revenue sharing model. If the Yankees are in a moment where they feel like if they're aggressive and they can win, Hal's going to approve that. Because when they want to go all in, they do. I just don't buy that we're going into some payroll cutting mode for the Yankees.
Andy Martino joining us right now, who obviously you can follow at Martino NYC for a lot of inside baseball news and reports and everything else, and does a great job for SNY. But also now, Andy, great to have you on, the author of a brand new book. You want to introduce that to the world here on FT?
Sure, and before I even do that, I got to say I was happy to get this request. Todd, I know I told you at the beginning of the week we ran into each other in an elevator, but you did a bang-up job in that booth, man. You were good, so I hope to see more of that.
Thank you.
And we're talking. I'm sorry if that is inconvenient to the rest of you to fluff him up more, but it just happens to be the truth.
Thank you.
And Eric, man, I feel like I know you because of the work you did with the great Tim Brown, who's a great friend of mine. But that book, I just wrote a baseball book, and I'm still telling you that your book is the best baseball book that's come out in years. So I mean it. I'm not just buttering you guys up for a nice interview. I mean both of those things. My book's called The Yankee Way. Thanks, Scott. It's called the Untold Inside Story of the Brian Cashman Era, as you can see right there. I spent about 2 years talking with Cashman about his time running the team, and even before then, just basically the modern history of the Yankees. But it's not his book. It's not his memoir. It's not his project, and he didn't have any control over it, which was important to both of us, actually, because he didn't feel it was time to write a book, and I didn't want to just be his mouthpiece. So I interviewed everyone I possibly could who'd been in or around that Yankee front office, clubhouse, competitors, whoever I could get to tell the full story of how that team has operated over decades. And that's basically what I did, and it came out this past week.
And give us a preview. What is going to tell us what's the one thing that's going to tell us that we don't know about the Cashman era? Because my opinion, before I even read your book, I hope you're praising this guy, because I think he has been one of the most underrated, underappreciated, probably because of the city that he's in, GM in the game.
Well, I didn't even have to praise him, Eric, because people kind of did that in their own interviews. I would say, you asked me what was most surprising. There's a lot of juicy stuff in there that comes when you report a book. Like, I didn't know how Joe Torre and Brian Cashman had their falling out. Now I know. That's in the book. Details about Aaron Judge's captaincy and leadership. Some unsung heroes, some guys in scouting that, other than the famous Gene Michael, that helped to build up that Yankee team. I learned a ton about that. But what you mentioned, the way Cashman is perceived maybe by a lot of fans and the way he's perceived inside the game, that might have been the biggest revelation, because the gap there is just massive. And I know that he's done battle with some high-profile players who might not be his biggest fans, but his rivals, I'll give you an example. I interviewed Billy Beane, who I think, probably because of Brad Pitt and the book, might be the most famous baseball GM of the past generation, but he is so convicted that Cashman is the best. He said he's the Tom Brady of GMs. He's the best executive in the history of the sport. And when I said, do you think Cashman's going to be in the Hall of Fame, Beane actually started yelling at me a little bit. He's like, what is a ridiculous question? Every time that man's name comes out of your mouth, you need to say future Hall of Famer first. And what it is, they've had fewer than 24 games since 1998, over 4,000 games that they've been eliminated from contention. They've never been below 500 since the early 90s. You guys inside the game understand that that's basically impossible. Even the great teams rebuild or have an off year, don't meet expectations. So the consistency of their program is I think one part of the stories that I'm telling. And I just couldn't believe, I knew Cashman was well regarded. I knew fans sometimes want him fired, but that difference in the perceptions inside and outside the game, that was like huge.
No doubt. And I think, excuse me, you bring up some really good points about him, what he's done, all the stuff he's been through. He's been there for a very long time. And then by no means am I saying I'm looking for somebody, but do you see any successor to him coming up soon, or whenever he wants to end up leaving?
So this is a really good question, Todd, because as I was reporting this, I had this interesting experience where other people in the organization, as I'm interviewing them, are saying to me, you think this is his last contract? Do you think he's on the way out? So that shows you how close he holds his cards, even to the people around him. And I asked him directly, and he played it a little coy. But what I will say is, his current deal is up in after the 26th season. He flirted with the idea of not coming back after 22 when that deal was up. But Judge was going to be a free agent. There was so much to do. He's so loyal to the Steinbrenner family that he, of course, did come back. But there's a lot of belief around him that he could be eyeing the end could be in sight here for this unbelievably long, successful tenure. And a specific name that I came up with all through up and down that organization, people expect a guy named Kevin Reese is the guy who's positioned to succeed him best. Now, Reese is exactly what the Yankees look for in a baseball ops leader, in that he played, he's got that on-field experience, he's been in pro scouting, now he's in player development. He understands the analytical piece, but he's got that blend, and that goes back to Gene Michael, who had the blend. Tim Nearing, who is unbelievably valuable now for them in their front office, who has that blend. Nearing's the guy that explains to me what's the Rap Soto do. Explain to me these crazy numbers, like from a player voice, he can break that down. And Cashman and the Steinbrenner family view Kevin Reese in that same vein as somebody who can speak both languages. There's that way to stereotype it. There's the analytics and there's the scouting, that divide. And what the Yankees are trying to do is find human beings that have all of that integrated. And Todd, frankly, I think they've come a long way with that since you played there. That was sort of the beginning, and there was some awkward maybe transition there. But now, just talking to Garrett Cole recently, the implementation, the communication, the analytics better than ever. And they see Reese as someone who could continue that potentially as a leader.
Andy, let me get your thoughts on Hal's comments this week.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to try and work something out with Soto, and they could communicate with him during the season. To me, that's not like shocking news by any means. What do you think of the comments about the payroll? And there's been two sides here. I'm trying to push my own narrative, so I'll see if you bite, okay? There's the narrative of, an owner's posturing because they're going to be in an intense contract negotiation with someone like Soto who's having a career year on a team that's going to want to keep him. I don't think there's any posturing that you can do. He's going to try and get as much money as possible. My thing was just an owner taking a shot at the end of the comment about how it's unsustainable with the luxury tax situation, which is a shot at other colleagues who just scoop up that money into their vacuum and often don't spend it. And also, ultimately, some owners want a salary cap too. So I think that's more the motive. I've spoken to some other people connected to the big market teams who feel the same way. What did you take from the comments?
Scott, I think that's a great insight. I believe Ken has offered that analysis too. Being around the Yankees all these years, you can't overstate how much they dislike that revenue sharing model. And you've got Hal coming out of these meetings. I don't presume to know if something in those meetings had that situation top of mind, but I mean, the Yankees in some ways feel they're not the only big market team that feels this way, but like you're subsidizing a team like the Rays in some way to beat you. And so that's a whole other conversation about that model, but I think that's great context. I think the other thing to remember about Hal Steinbrenner that I learned, or maybe not to remember, but for me to describe about him, is that although he is so remarkably different in his impulsiveness or lack of impulsiveness from his father, the emotion, the passion, the enthusiasm are actually quite strong to the point where people that work for him can really feel that heat at times, as they should. I've talked to other owners who've been with him in owners' meetings when the Yankees have been going badly in the past and say, boy, Hal's really wearing it. He's not happy. The Yankees just lost 2 or 3 or what have you. So my point is that when push comes to shove, just like he did this past offseason, taking on Soto, trading prospects for him, wanting to get Yamamoto, which would have pushed that payroll even crazier. If the Yankees are in a moment where they feel like if they're aggressive and they can win, Hal's going to approve that, because when they want to go all in, they do. And their priority is to get back to that World Series. They're as hungry and thirsty for that taste of late October again as their fans are. So I just don't buy that we're going into some payroll cutting mode for the Yankees. I do buy that Hal doesn't want to be paying 110% tax on every dollar. Neither does Steve Cohen, which influenced the Mets roster decisions this offseason. But I think I understand why fans don't want to hear that, and why maybe it came out a little bit more severe than, I don't know exactly what he intended, but it was a little deflating probably for people to hear. But I think you're on the right track with what he was actually meaning by that, Scott.
I want to meld the two things that we've talked about so far, Cashman and George and Hal. Who's the architect of all these teams? And did you flesh that out while you were talking to people or even talking to Cash? Like, was George and Hal the architects of those teams? or was Cash the one that was saying, guys, hey, this is a value here. We want this. And they're like, yeah, stamp of approval.
Well, you know what's interesting? It's a great question, and as I'm doing this reporting on baseball operations over a group over 40, 50 years, you realize just how collaborative it all is. The buck stops with the GM and the owner, but we hear about Gene Michael. There's a guy named Bill Livesey who baseball people know and respect, who designed so much of the Yankee philosophies in the 80s that still exist now. Like, if you want to know why they traded for Harrison Bader a couple years ago, or why they moved Gleyber Torres off shortstop, or were eager to move on from Luke Voigt, or what have you, current decisions have their roots in what a Bill Livesey did in the 80s, setting philosophies while Cashman was an intern and then a young employee. Then you've got a George Steinbrenner who contributed a lot of instability, but also probably knew how to push buttons to get people to really go all in when it was time for some dynasty years. Then you have Cashman, who is obviously making all of the roster decisions, or most of them, for the past couple of decades with support from Hal. So that kind of success is going to require good relationships and close communication. But I would say if you're looking at baseball ops, Gene Michael, Bill Livesey, and a guy named Jack Butterfield, who's the father of Brian Butterfield, the well-known coach. These guys were like foundational pieces, and Brian Sabian too. Cashman has moved it forward over the past couple decades, and Hal, because he's more rational and not as eager to hire and fire people all the time, has helped to keep that success in place. Was that too long an answer? Did that help with what you were looking for?
That is perfect. As a guy that got signed and fired and signed and fired 4 times with the Yankees, I love hearing every one of those names, because you talk to somebody like Narin, you talk to somebody like Booney, who's been in the org, and you talk to Cash. They always bring up those names, like the lessons they learned from those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about a long history of the Yankees. There's a reason. It's because of the people that they bring in. And if they stop bringing in good people, the Yankees will cease to be the Yankees.
This show, Foul Territory, is hosted by all former major leaguers plus me, just trying to keep up with these guys, right? So we are into daily health, energy, gut health, the whole deal. Pretty obvious. So we want to talk about AG1. I first gave AG1 a try because a friend recommended it to me a while back, and it's helped me on many levels. Focus, stress, gut health, big one for me. I'm also allergic to gluten and dairy, and this covers both categories there. So make sure you take ownership of your health by visiting drinkag1.com/foul. But I'm not the only one, because this on the desk here right now, and I've been on the road a lot, so I've got my travel packets. Mr. Kratz is drinking AG1 as well.
Dude, the travel packets are a game changer. Just this weekend, we took it to Kansas City. You're in a hotel. They're not like all of it. Like, yes, you can find the juice places, but it's nothing like what's in these packs.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like, just the like energy that I have, and I just feel more alert because I don't drink energy drinks.
Yep.
And it's great. It is awesome. Obviously, at home, it's awesome, but the travel packs are the real G.
Listen, I know I'm 37. I know I look great, but I'm looking out. I'm checking the mail for my packets. I'm checking the mail for my packets, Crassy.
This is what happens. You recommend to a family or friend. So we got you then, okay? So you replace your multivitamin just with AG1. You don't need, to fill up your shelf. Just it's one packet, or obviously you have the tub and one scoop, which includes prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes for gut support. And yes, you can recommend it to friends, formulated based on the latest science and maintains high quality standards if you're of age. It's kind of one size fits all, which is great. So it's a foundational nutritional supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. And if there's one product we would recommend to elevate your health, it is AG1. So we're excited to welcome them as a new partner to the FT fam. So if you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul, F-O-U-L. That's drinkag1.com/foul. Go check it out.
Steve Cohen could say across town, okay, I love hearing Hal say we're not going to spend money. Is he going to pounce this offseason, or is he just going to kind of lay in the weeds and put the money out there and then pounce?
I don't think that Cohen would say that quote the way Hal said it exactly, but I think he would agree in some respects of like, we can't be jammed up with 110% luxury tax every year. So the spirit of that comment, I don't think Cohen would be that different from it. He's always going to be an aggressive spender as the owner of the Mets, but I think with David Stearns there as a GM who has process based and considers himself rational in that way, I think that spending will always be selective, like targeted, like the Dodgers, really. I mean, how many big free agents have the Dodgers passed up on during the Guggenheim years, even though now, obviously, they're coming out an off season where they had a much more aggressive approach. But Mets fans hoping that Cohen will be in every free agent. We've already seen, like with Aaron Judge, for example, that's not always going to be the case. But Hal and Cohen have that competitive gene, both of them. I've been around them and their people enough to know that they're ready to push their chips into the table at the right moment, but Cohen's not going to be spending like a drunken sailor, just like Hal plans on not doing that. Now, obviously, the natural follow-up to that is the Soto free agency and how that's going to play out between those two. And will Cohen, with his better resources, make an offer that Soto can't refuse? That's what everybody is waiting to find out, of course.
And I like how they went at it this past offseason, although they both lost for Yamamoto. But you haven't seen the Mets and the Yankees battle at that level too much in the past couple decades, but I think we're going to get a lot more of it, and I'm here for it. I think New York will love it. So my question to you is on the Pete Alonso side of things, which obviously is dominating the storylines for Mets fans for a while now. And I know I can't totally pinpoint it, and you probably can do this better. I know there were some reports about the last offer from the Mets being, I think, like 7,150-ish last June. So where are we at? And if the Mets are not good, which I think will be the case, like they'll be 10 games under 500 come trade deadline. If they trade him, that's a move because this is a guy who wants to be a Met for life.
Yeah, that report about the contract offer from Joel Sherman was accurate. I'd heard the same after Joel reported it. So that was what he turned down. That shows you that his expectations are quite high. I thought Ken at The Athletic did a great job recently breaking down the complexity of Alonso's free agency, and I think there was a line in that column that I completely agree with, which is Alonso might be worth more to the Mets than to anybody else. And that's not a knock on him, but he's their icon. So it's a situation where you might pay a premium to keep a guy, whereas the rest of the league, through their analytical lens, is looking like it's not the greatest financial time to be a slugging, right-handed, power-hitting first baseman who's going into his 30s. Now, Alonso has elite power, like 70, 80 power, right? And that's hard to find, and he's been a great Met. So to me, I could see a fit there because it's worked so well for both sides so far. But that's another one. You know, some people speculate on the Yankees with him. I don't think he has the right handedness, and I don't think he has the right defensive profile for the Yankees. It's one thing Bill Livesey came up with in the 80s. As a third baseman, he ranked all the tools in order of importance for each position. And for a third and a first baseman should have at least their field tool should be at least their third best tool in the Yankee Way philosophy. And Alonso's not quite there. That's why Todd Frazier would have been a Yankee Way third baseman for all of your career, because they like corner infielder guys that can really pick it, right? So I think Pete and the Mets makes a lot more sense to me than Pete and anyone else that I can think of top of mind. And as far as trading him, boy, you'd have to be really far out of the wild card to be able to swallow that. And who is anymore that far out of the wild card to make a big move like that? But we'll see. They're not trending in the right direction, obviously.
To finish on the Pete Alonso thing, it's just that, as you said it perfectly, that's his home. This is where he needs to be. I just can't picture him somewhere else. And, you know, you got Steve Cohen coming out and said, you know, about the playoffs and about this and that, about, you know, not looking too good. They're going this way right now. And I think the only thing that can spark them up right now is signing him, in my opinion. But, you know, I don't see that happening.
No. Soto, as you guys well know, Soto and Alonso have an agent who you get this in Scott Boras, you get this close to free agency, you'd be crazy not to try to get both New York teams, other people into a bidding war. We'll just see. The Alonso free agency is fascinating in light of what's happened with some of the Boris clients with high expectations last offseason. The way I just described Pete's profile, which isn't always what teams want to spend the most on these days. I agree with you, Todd, that it's a fit there. I'm not ready to say, oh, I think it'll get done, because he's a really good player and he's going to be on the open market for 30 teams to consider. But it does. It feels like a fit, just like Soto feels like a fit for the Yankees. It seems to be settling to a point where you're like, I can see both of those guys going back to the teams that they're already on, because that feels like home for both of them, for both of those Boris clients.
Yeah, like a Judge situation. You get to free agency, you dance a little bit, you get a nice dinner with a couple teams, and then you go back home. So I think that would work.
Well,
Andy,
Judge danced more than a little bit, Scott. I got to say, that was a scary moment for the Yankees. The arson judge and is he going to the Giants? And I was around the Yankee front office that whole winter meetings, and they were freaking out. No idea where he was or where he was at. But so they're hoping that this is less stressful. But yeah, I take your point. Ultimately, that those guys will come back to their home teams.
They played him good, though. Oh, look, Judge is at the hotel.
Yeah.
Oh, look,
how about
here
that?
he is. Paparazzi. I'm sure you got some of that in the book, right?
That one I did, and this is no knock on Aaron Judge. You got to give him and his agent, Paige Odell, props for this. But a guy in the Giants told me that the Judge group admitted that TMZ thing was, let's just say it was part of the playbook. So you're like, all right, well played. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, hey, Aaron Judge, what are you doing here? It was, they knew what they were doing, and they beat the Yankees in that negotiation. Let's be clear. The number ended up so much higher than where the Yankees were at, and it works out for everybody. He's a great leader, great Yankee, but some of that free agent stuff was definitely wild, and that is in the book.
Yeah, I love that. All right, perfect way to end it then. Everyone go check out the Yankee Way wherever you get your books. Go look it up right now. Amazon, local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, etc. It came out a few days ago. Andy, great to have you on here, man. Don't be a stranger. Loved having you.
Anytime, guys. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.